Saturday here on PEN. Thank you for joining us. This is a very rare occasion, and I've actually been talking with our guests. We might make this kind of a semi-regular thing. We'll see how it goes. But tonight we are going to learn, and I can't stress that enough. I want everybody to be able to take something away from this that you didn't know before you got here. Tonight we are pleased to be joined by Mr. Benjamin Lonetree. Are you there?
I'm here.
And tonight we will be discussing Sedona, Arizona, which, for our viewers, if you do not know, Sedona is one of those rare physical locations on the planet where there are geographical reasons why it's special, geographical reasons why it's special, but those geographical reasons have helped bolster why they are metaphysically or spiritually important. Because much like we kind of already know in our paranormal research that everything kind of, after a while, everything does kind of blend together a little bit. But Ben, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm fighting a little bit of a flu bug, but after a few cups of coffee, I'm doing okay, so all's well.
If it weren't for Juan Valdez, there's a lot of us that wouldn't make it through the day.
I hear you.
But you've been to Sedona how long now, sir?
Oh, ever since 1999. I arrived here in 99, and I worked for a company. We did a project up in Flagstaff, and a lot of the people that we brought in to work for us were from the Navajo Nation. And I got to know one gentleman real well, and he asked me if I had been to Sedona yet, and I told him no. And he said, you need to go there. That's where the earth speaks. And that really got my curiosity up a little bit. And then here we are, 12, 13 years later.
But, you know, it's very interesting that you phrase it that way, that the earth speaks. I kind of understand what you already mean, but could you explain to my viewers what you mean, and what language does the earth speak? I know it's not English.
No, it's not. To me, it's English. I've been doing this so long. I can visualize in my mind's eye and my mind's ears. I'm recording electromagnetic energy that emanates from Sedona. I can actually visualize it or rationalize it and get a good picture of it. Now, by the earth speaking, and, well, let's see. Let me back up here. Talking a little bit about Sedona. Sedona is very red. If any of the viewers have ever been there or you ever look it up on the internet, it's all the rocks, the trees, the soil, and even the inner bark of trees from drawing moisture up through the root system is red. That's from iron oxide, Fe2O3. Now, iron oxide, and I might be rambling a little bit here, but I got to pull in a bunch of different thoughts.
No, please.
If you look at a loudspeaker out of a radio or out of a speaker system, you have a big magnet on the back of it. And in front of that magnet, you have a coil of wire that the audio voltage feeds into, and then you have a diaphragm in front of it. Now, the whole point is that magnet is made out of ferrous material. In other words, its base mineral is iron. The base mineral up in Sedona is iron, and there's a bunch of other stuff that's up there. What I believe is happening there, and these are all my opinions and what I found in the last decade plus of researching, that iron oxide adds inductance, what's called inductance, to the area. So that whole area resonates at ultra-low frequencies, or I'll rephrase it. Ultra-low frequencies that emit from the ground are enhanced by the iron oxide that's in Sedona. That's just one aspect of it. Now, also in Sedona, and you can see this on my website, SedonaAnomalies.com, beneath the iron oxide and in the iron oxide, which is impregnated in the sandstone, are quartz crystals. There's quite a layer of quartz crystals beneath all of the red mountains and the things that you see there. The U.S. Geological Survey did a study of the electromagnetic energy that emanates in the Sedona area and Page Springs nearby and several other small towns and communities. When they study magnetic anomalies in the ground, they're able to pinpoint, okay, there's water over here, there might be underground water flowing over there, just because it distorts the magnetic field as it emanates from the Earth. So they did that survey because even in the high desert, water is a commodity. There's not a lot of it. There are some areas near Sedona, Page Springs, where there's a lot of artesian wells. So there's a place up there you can see the water just shooting like nuts out of the side of the hill. So they did a study on that. Now what they found is the layers of quartz crystals that exist beneath all of the red iron oxide and the sandstone and the limestone and a volcanic element which is called basalt, and we'll go into that a little bit later. The quartz crystals distort the magnetic field as it emanates from the inside of the planet, and they're also producing their own magnetic field. So there is a tremendous amount of stuff going on up in Sedona. Is Sedona the only place this happens? Probably not. I'm told Patagonia, which is very similar to Sedona in the southern part of the state of Arizona, also has the same qualities. Of course, I haven't been there to research any of it yet. Now, by the Earth speaking, we'll go into a guy by the name of Dr. Michael Persinger, and again, you can access his work on my website, or you can do a search on him on Google. What he has done up at Laurentia University in Canada is he and another guy have created what's called the Corin helmet. Now, the helmet is just a bunch of different solenoids, which is, I'm trying not to get too technical, so bear with me. What he does is through a computer-generated program, he injects rotating magnetic fields through this helmet in the test subjects' temporal lobes of their brain. Now, he came out with a pattern that rotates in a circular motion at approximately 2.8 to 2.9 cycles per second. That's the rate of rotation. When he subjects people to that, primarily his students at the university, it gives them the feeling that God is standing behind them, or there is a presence in the room with them. That's why it's affectionately called the God helmet. So that same thing, I believe, one of the things that are happening in Sedona is the magnetic energy that's emanating out of the ground that is a product of the planet and a product of the quartz crystals and a product of the Earth's magnetic field being distorted by the quartz crystals. Since it's in a spiral spinning type action, it might be stimulating the temporal lobes of our brain where it's altering us. Now, that sounds a little bit synthesized. What Dr. Persinger is doing is synthesizing the experience, and he can repeat it, so it has the same effect over and over and over again on different subjects. I don't think that's what's happening in Sedona. It is not induced. I think what it does is alters us, alters our reality, or shifts our awareness to a different dimension or different perspective where we're more open to other things that exist other than the physical. And I hope that makes sense. Sedona was very spiritual to the Native Americans, and I understand why today. They've never lived in it. It was a place of worship. You could have two groups of Native Americans that were fighting each other, and both of them could go to Sedona and do prayer sessions and lay their arms down and stand next to each other and do their prayers and communicate with the earth, and then later on go back to fighting again. So very, very special place. So by the earth speaking, I call it speaking because it does communicate with us. It alters us to make us more receptive to communication. Now, I refer to what's called Schumann resonance as the planet's voice. Now, Schumann, if you look at the Earth as a big ball.
Well, Ben, I do have a graphic. Let me put that graphic up so people can see the animation and just keep talking. It'll just explain it.
Okay, you look at the planet as a big ball. Well, around the planet is our atmosphere. So look at it as the Earth as a sphere within a sphere. There's a portion of the atmosphere called the D layer. Now that D layer acts as a reflective surface. So if you look between the surface of the planet and that reflective D layer, you have a spherical cavity. They call it the waveguide. Now, to get a good understanding of what that waveguide does, if anybody remembers back to the old AM radio days when you were driving in your car at night, you're able to hear a radio station coming from another state. Now, that's because the transmission from that radio station reflected off the D layer and then came back down to the planet again where you could listen to it. Same thing happens with shortwave radio. It reflects off from different layers in the atmosphere.
And that's the voodoo and the black magic of ham radio operation, is knowing exactly how your antenna affects the atmosphere and what layer you're bouncing off of, and what frequencies you're going to be able to pick up and what you won't be able to pick up, so you don't waste your time. And I mean that all figures in. I just want to explain that because a lot of people do still understand the ham operating days, and the reference makes a lot of sense for them.
I still do it. I have all my equipment here. I just don't have anything set up to put it into use, but it's here. In fact, with the frequencies usable, they call it MUF, maximum usable frequency for any given time of the day and any given time during the solar cycle. Now, back to the Schumann resonance. At any given second, any given point in time, somewhere on the planet are at least 1 to 200 lightning strikes. And they're happening almost continuously. That's 1 to 200 lightning strikes per second. Now, if you take a bell and you look at the clapper inside of the bell, when you take the clapper and strike it to the outside of the bell, it rings, and it rings at its resonant frequency, which is a product of the shape and the size and the material. If you look at lightning as the clapper in a bell, every time there's a lightning strike, it rings that spherical cavity. And that ringing is the Schumann resonance. Now, Schumann occurs, they claim, at 7 different frequencies, or there's 7 different resonances. They appear to be harmonics of the other, but they're really not. They're related mathematically, but they're not true harmonics of a primary. The primary first resonance is at 7.83 cycles per second, and the other one, there's another one at 14, then you bounce up to 26, 30 to 31, 39, 45 hertz, and I've recorded the 8th resonance. Science speculates that they go on and on and on and on in frequency, that there's a bunch of them, but as you go higher in frequency, they become progressively weaker, and they're very difficult to see. The first Schumann resonance, which is usually the strongest, or the primary vibration, at 7.83 cycles, has a signal strength of what's called 1 picotesla. To draw a comparison to that, the Earth's magnetic field is 200,000 times stronger than the first Schumann resonance. That's why I call these subtle energies, very, very subtle. So going back to the original part of this, I refer to the Schumann resonance as Mother Earth's voice. It's her voice. That's her talking. And it's a product of lightning. Now, I could go off in the tangents on, they call it the chimneys. There's 7 different chimneys that create the bulk of the lightning strikes that ring the Schumann resonance. So I'm hoping that this all makes sense and I'm explaining it simply enough. So what you have happening in Sedona, in part, is you have natural magnetism altering our state of mind or state of being, which makes us more receptive to subtle energies like Schumann resonance. Oh, let's backtrack. I've discovered something else up there. Back in, it was towards the end of 1999 when I made my first trip to Sedona. I do something else called VLF activity, which is very low frequency listening to atmospheric energy. And what that is if you look at the range of human hearing, somebody with good ears, you can hear from 50, 60 cycles per second, possibly all the way up to 10,000 cycles per second. As I'm talking to your audience and to you here, my voice is occupying that frequency range. Well, at the same time, our atmosphere is making all kinds of noise at those same frequencies but you need semi-specialized equipment to be able to receive that and then amplify it so you can listen to it audibly. So I brought my receiver with me from back east for listening to atmospherics, and I took it to Sedona, and the first thing I noticed is everything is enhanced. Everything's louder, stronger, immensely. As soon as I leave the Red Rocks and I go down to, let's say, Cottonwood or some of the other areas, everything returns back to normal. It's not enhanced. So that's why I draw the analogy back over again to all of the quartz crystals buried there and in the base beneath the mountains, and some are mixed in the mountains and the iron oxide, raising the inductance of the area, so everything gets amplified. Now, as I'm listening to the atmospherics, I wonder what happens to Schumann resonance. Well, that's when I built my first coil, which has maybe about 90,000 turns of wire on it and weighs about 55 pounds. I took that up, built up the equipment to monitor Schumann resonance, and lo and behold, the same thing. Schumann resonance is enhanced in Sedona, and that operates at a frequency spectrum of extremely low frequency, or what they call ELF frequency. As soon as I take the equipment out of Sedona, the signal strength returns to normal, which is very, very low. Now, so what's the meaning of all of that? If you're in Sedona, and primarily if you're in an area that's emanating the spiraling vortex energy, not only will you have the effect of the magnetic energy altering you, you will be more tuned to tapping into Schumann resonance. Okay.
Well, Ben, I have a question that just to try to help me kind of wrap my big rotten melon around this.
Go right ahead.
Would you say that because of the geographical, the inductiveness of the soil, the layer of quartz, would you say that the Schumann resonance almost becomes like a subliminal message, biologically to us as human beings?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was the next direction I was going in. Dr. Schumann, who was credited with discovering Schumann resonance or proving its existence in 1952. By the way, Nikolai Tesla was given that honor now because he discussed them and supposedly recorded them back when he was doing his thing before Dr. Schumann. So at any rate, they're named after Schumann. One of Schumann's students, Koenig, his name was, hypothesized that as we evolved, whether we came out of the ocean or whatever, and as our cells multiplied and we became human beings, as we were evolving, we were continuously being subjected to the Schumann resonances. Now, the resonances occupy the same frequency range as our brain waves, alpha, beta, theta, delta. And then there's high beta, there's gamma, which is way up there. They all occupy the same range as Schumann resonance. So Koenig, one of Schumann's students, hypothesized, since we were continuously subjected to that, our brainwave activity and our entire nervous system evolved as a product of being subjected to the Schumann resonances. Now, mainstream science will poo-poo that and go, no, not possible, but everything fits with it like a glove. Other interesting thoughts with it too, they call it psi, PSI. Is it possible that Schumann resonance itself could contain additional data within it? I don't see why not. Mm-hmm. What that data is, I don't know. Let's take the first Schumann resonance. Most signals that are produced, like if you look at 60 hertz or 60 cycles produced by the power grid, it's a very high Q signal. In other words, it's very narrow if you look at it on a chart or on a graph. Schumann resonance, the first Schumann resonance is 1 cycle thick, 1 hertz thick. That's broad. That's broad bandwidth when you look at signals that exist that are not man-made. So I have already looked inside of the first Schumann resonance. The inside of the first Schumann resonance almost looks like a DNA strand. There are multiple, God, how do I describe this? If you've seen pictures of a tornado where inside the funnel there is another secondary vortex that shoots up through it, inside of the first Schumann resonance there are additional strands like little mini electromagnetic flux lines that flow within it. They themselves could contain information. What is that information? As far as I'm concerned, information from the planet. I've been doing this so long, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I imagine a lot of the viewers have seen the movie Avatar, where they go and plug their tail or whatever it is into the tree and they communicate with the planet. That is not far-fetched. Our technology isn't advanced enough where we can do that yet, but I looked at that and I went, that's within the realm of possibility. Our ancestors, and I sincerely believe this, were so in tune with the planet. Native Americans are still in tune with it. And other indigenous tribes in South America and elsewhere on the planet. We've grown away from that. We have a lot of external stimulus. We have our computer systems, we have Facebook, and all of that stuff is great. But we have been so conditioned with material things, we have lost sight of how to connect with the planet.
I totally concur.
We used to be able to know how to do that. I can still do that. And in fact, periodically I have to get out of the city here and go up to Sedona and just go out on a mountain somewhere and sit in a vortex just to get my head back together again. Rebalance. Reboot. However you want to put it. So, going back along those lines of us, our nervous systems and brainwave activity evolving with the planet or being subjected to what's going on with the planet, we are part of her. We are so connected to the planet it isn't funny. And when we lose that being connected to it, that's when we become ill, we become sick. So I'm a big proponent of reconnect with the earth. Very, very important.
Well, speaking along those lines too, Ben, when you start talking about I know that exact frequency-wise, they do not match, but when you start talking about having the 7 different Schumann resonances, 8, but 7 main, there's also the Solfeggio frequencies.
Oh, yeah.
That there's 7 of those, there's 7 chakras, that can't be coincidence.
No, it isn't. In fact, if you look at the Western musical scale, that's A, B, C, D, E, F. In fact, you should have that chart there. In fact, I can call it up. That'll help me. Bear with me just a little bit here for sake of discussion. Okay, here we go. In fact, I wrote a little book years ago called 7 Subtle Vibrations. It's on my website if people want to look at it. The first book I wrote was 172 pages long, and I gave it to a friend of mine, one of the store owners up in Sedona, and he says, you need a PhD to understand this, make it simple. So I created this little 25, 27-page book, and that was harder to write than the 172-page version. Any rate, in here I discuss where the base chakra resonates with the note C. The sacral chakra resonates with the note D, solar plexus chakra resonates note E, and so on and so forth. The heart chakra resonates with the note F. Now, the interesting thing about Schumann resonance, if you look at 7.83 cycles, that matches B sharp, 7.71 hertz. That's also the crown chakra. So you could look at the first Schumann resonance as resonating or vibrating with the crown chakra.
Or if you wanted, or to kind of keep everything else in line, it would be what a musician would consider middle C. It is the origin.
Yeah. Yes, the Western musical scale is based on middle C. I don't think it's by coincidence because the whole scale you can compare right over to the Schumann resonances,
right,
as well as our brainwave activity, our nervous system functions. So again, I think the musical scale, as we developed it, was probably a direct result of being subjected to Schumann resonance. I don't think it's a mistake that it ends up at the same frequencies.
And that also explains why well, much like you had mentioned about Sedona, there are very spiritual, it's the kind of place that everybody knows, because when you just encounter the area, when you first enter the area, now that I would know, the resonance is affecting you. It's realigning you to where you actually should be.
It's taking you to where you should be.
Right.
Now, in the process of that, I've already taken people up to Sedona for their first time and took them out to one of my favorite sites, and they either started laughing, smiling, or burst into tears. What will happen up there, and again, if you want to look at it logically and scientifically, and I've found this from my own experience, when you are in an outflow of energy, the energy is emanating out of the ground, it's very uplifting. I have found I would be able to project, or I've never gone OBE up there, but you almost feel like you could go out-of-body experience. There are other areas. Laws of physics states whenever you have magnetic energy leaving the planet, it has to reconnect. Mm-hmm. It's a closed circuit. Just like you look at activity and flares going on up on the sun, you'll see a magnetic rope flare come up and then the magnetic flux reconnect back into the surface. Same thing happens up in Sedona. That magnetic energy doesn't take off and leave. It has to reconnect.
Well, with that...
Now, when it reconnects, that's an inflow of energy. It's spiraling in. When you're in an inflow, I have found if you're carrying a lot of garbage or baggage or you're negative and you're in an inflow, it's going to accent that. It's going to make it stronger and very powerful. I think that's why some people start crying with it. Sedona is a great place spiritually if you want to take all of the garbage and crap going on within, to get rid of it, to release it. It's a very powerful place. I almost want to say you got to know what you're doing. I found a rock up there that I like to lay on that's very intensely inflowing. And like I said in one of my videos, I stayed on that rock for about 15, 20 minutes, and I had all I could do to get back up. I had to pry and push myself away from it because I got pulled into it very deeply. It has a profound effect on you. That's my whole point.
Well, let me ask you a question. Like you mentioned, if you are in the in an outflow, it's an uplifting experience. If you're in an inductive part of this, would it be possible that if there was a big enough inductive part, would that have the exact opposite effect sometimes, though?
Inductive or inflow? I'm not sure I follow you. An
inflow. A
lot of people tell me they love the inflows of energy. It reconnects them in that aspect too.
Okay.
I like the outflows because I like that uplifting feeling. A lot of it's going to vary on the person, Eric. Mm-hmm. It all depends, what's going on inside of you. Another thing that I want to stress, when I first went to Sedona, I was 100% logic and 100% scientist and engineer. I set out there to disprove this stuff. I went, no, this is a bunch of crap put out there by people just to make money off tourists.
Right.
Was I wrong? And I'm very happy to report I was wrong on it. It does exist. I was not able to disprove it. Again, the energy that exists there is subtle. It's not real strong. So just because if a person goes to Sedona and goes, well, I don't feel anything, or they're there for a week and they don't feel anything, you have to have the ability to quiet yourself. You don't have to know Zen meditation, but just to be able to go to one of these places, sit down and relax and quiet yourself. That is the key to have a Vortex experience.
Wow. And that's something we should define for our viewers, Ben. What a lot of people seek Vortex, and as much as I hate to say this, they think if you're in the northern hemisphere, it spins this way when you flush, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, it spins that way when you flush. That's a whirlpool is basically the only way a lot of people can understand a vortices. Maybe we should explain a little bit when you're talking in Sedona and you're talking about a vortex. What exactly are you talking about?
Spinning magnetic energy.
Okay.
Now, like a tornado, like a whirlpool, same thing. Can you define how wide it is at the point of debarkation as it emits out of the ground or where it re-enters? No, you really can't define it. I've seen that energy occupy an area, and I've measured it with my equipment, maybe 100 feet in diameter where it's leaving the planet. And I've also seen it re-enter the planet the size of a pinpoint. I have another friend of mine over in Oak Creek, which is almost part of Sedona, that is a retired geologist. And he doesn't go into the metaphysical aspect. In fact, if you mention that, he'll back up and close the door. But we got talking one time about magnetic in and out flows, and we were with another gentleman friend of mine that is retired from the Atomic Energy Commission, and he was very poo-pooing all this. And the geologist looked at him, he says, he says, one time we chased a magnetic outflow, and he says it took us 2 days, and we found it 20 feet up a cliff where it re-entered the planet to reconnect, and it was the size of a pinhead. So very, very tiny. So you can compare the vortices to what you see on the sun, and I wish I had an image. If you go to Soho or you go to space weather with all of the solar activity and you see one of those magnetic loops, you know what I'm talking about, Eric,
yes, I
right?
do.
Yeah, well, basically that's what a vortex can look like up there. Now, visually I can't see that. My gut tells me that's pretty much what they resemble, because they will have a point where they're leaving the planet, and then they have a point where they re-enter the planet again.
Another really good example would be when they show solar flares.
Yeah.
You'll see a huge lick of energy and plasma that comes out, but it doesn't just keep going straight out and come to a point. It goes out so far and it turns back in towards the sun, and then most times disappears. But
yeah, when the CME happens, that's actual particles, that's actually matter leaving the sun, and gravitationally it's pulled back. But when you have, usually those are preceded or at the same time there is a magnetic burst of energy, and that's that magnetic flux energy that you can see. It's like a tube.
Right.
Now, speaking of the sun, let's go another direction. They call them flux ropes or flux tubes. The sun emits a magnetic field. And periodically, if there is a strong enough burst of magnetic energy from a point on the sun, it will not necessarily come out and then loop back in and reconnect. It'll keep going and connect with the planet, the Earth's magnetic field. That's called a flux rope, because it connects together. And science knows that they exist. Back in 2000, 2001, I recorded a burst of energy, magnetic energy in Sedona that just blew me away. Well, at the same time, there was one of these huge emissions from the sun that could have possibly created a flux rope from the sun down to the Earth, and I think its point of contact was up in Sedona. Why? Again, Fe2O3, all of the iron oxide, it's a great conductor. That does not happen all the time, so my point is I'm not saying that a flux rope is a vortex. Totally something different. My whole point is you also have energy, magnetic energy from the sun that can connect to the Earth in places like Sedona, and that's going to alter and affect you too.
And alter and affect the Earth, because as clear as the field is leaving the ground there in Sedona, that also means that any outside influence is going to be magnified and back into the Earth. Right.
Yeah. And does magnetic energy and things like storms that occur on the sun affect people? You betcha.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
And it affects the modern people even worse, because solar flares don't do really good things with cell phone reception.
No,
it messes up satellite communication. It messes up. There's a whole list of things that our modern technologically superior society is based on that are affected by solar flares.
We're very vulnerable to it. If we ever have any major activity, it could. A lot of people are concerned that it'll put the grid down. If you remember back in the 70s when the Northeast had that massive power outage, that was the fault of a large solar flare, and they didn't have precautions in place with the grid. So as one part of the grid shut down, it was a chain reaction and took, like a domino effect, took the other ones out. I don't really see that as a big issue today, because they put a lot of safeguards in place. Will it literally light up and fry all the equipment? No. It will shut the system down, but within a day or so or a few hours, it's going to be back up again. So I am not concerned or worried about a major flare taking out our grid. I think there's too much hype put into it. At any rate, we won't go there.
Right.
Backing up on Schumann resonance, and I want to stress this because it's kind of one of my pet peeves. A lot of people are under the impression that Schumann resonance is rising in frequency. Not true. I will put $1 million, if I had $1 million, out on the table in front of me, set up the equipment, and show you it is not rising in frequency. Now, Schumann cannot rise in frequency unless our atmosphere in thickness or volume or mass changes. And it's not. Schumann resonance has been at the frequencies it's been at for millions of years. Except for in 1958 when they detonated one of the atomic bombs down here in the southwest, it actually, the force distorted the atmosphere enough where Schumann actually raised in frequency about 2 to 3 cycles per second, and then it came back down in again. Other than that, it's not changing frequency. It's right where it always has been.
Well, that's because it would take a huge change in mass, and every time there's ever been any kind of mass change that large on the planet, it's been a meteor smashing into us.
Oh, yeah.
Which would wipe out life, and the last thing, if a meteor hit, the last thing anybody's going to be thinking about is the Schumann resonance, because you're going to be trying to worry about how you're going to grow crops, yada 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 yada.
Well, if you even survive it,
yeah.
I mean, the amount of dirt that an impact would put up into the atmosphere would put us into a perpetual winter or ice age for about 7-8 years.
Right. Well, and it's just so absolutely fascinating to me that the Schumann resonance, the Schiphagio frequencies, Let
me give you a little thing, not to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I'm at the point in my life, if I get a thought, I better say it or I'm going to lose it. The Schiphagio scale, or however you want to pronounce it, some people researching it are finding that it can have an effect or stimulate the pituitary gland, or the pineal gland, I forget now. I think the pineal gland.
It's a pineal gland, yes.
Pineal gland, yes. So again, going back to these electromagnetic energies that are all around us, especially the natural ones that we evolved and grew with, can be very, very beneficial. I interrupted. Go ahead, please.
Well, no, I was just. It's so fascinating that this just kind of all, not to generalize it and shrink it down into something that it's not, but we are a product of our environment.
Product of the environment and a product of the planet.
Right.
Literally.
And we literally are. This just goes a long, long way to prove that we are part of the planet, and we better damn sure start acting that way.
Yeah, we should. And, that's a different subject in itself, but
true.
I've had people in the past ask me, what do we do to heal the planet? And my response to them is usually, you don't have to worry about her because she'll send us the route of the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And
she'll clean house.
And she will if we totally neglect her.
Yeah. And it's sad that you have to speak to people. You have to let them know that, hey, yeah, if we don't change our ways, we can't always blame Al Gore. I know he's the easy global warming meat puppet, but it is true. And that's I found this interesting too, Ben, because I've actually seen this on several shows that I've watched recently. They're doing very, very interesting studies down in Antarctica and on the North Pole, where they're pulling out ice cores from hundreds of thousands of years ago. And what they're actually finding is this is not the first time that CO2 is built up in the atmosphere and things heated up and polar caps melted. This will be like the 1,000th time since the planet formed. The planet
cycles every 26,000 years. It goes through a change.
And people, but what I'm saying is people don't do the research. People don't look into things enough like that. So you get the fear mongers out there going, oh, it's God, and God is making all this happen, and you better change your ways, or we're all going to. That's not the case. It's a cycle, and if we were in touch with the planet, we would know that.
Yes.
my point.
Now, God is another experience and another subject, and a lot of people don't believe in he, she, or it, or I like to call it the force.
Right.
I went on a quest years ago where I wanted, okay, is this a bunch of crap or is it reality? For myself, I have absolutely no doubt that there is a very kind and benevolent force at work in the universe, just as there is a negative. Yin and yang, light and dark, and on and on and on. Does God exist, in my opinion? Yes. Or a creative force. I'm not necessarily saying it is what's pictured in the Bible, but from a spiritualistic aspect of it, there is a very kind and benevolent singularity that is at work in the universe. And I won't go into the story on how I came to that conclusion, but it's pretty incredible in itself, and I'd like to write a book on the experience someday. In the same token, there is equal and opposite forces. Fortunately, the good outweighs all of the bad with it. And I do have a problem, just like you mentioned too, Eric, where somebody will take something that is very minuscule or natural and make a big disaster and a calamity out of it. The last thing that the Creator or the last thing that this planet wants is to turn everything negative. It's more of understand what's going on so you can ride out the storm, be part of that change, and hopefully evolve with the planet.
Right.
Move with it instead of going, the sky's falling. That's just, number one, it's not healthy. And I don't believe it is the Creator up there going, if you don't change your ways, you're going to get it.
Correct, and you don't want it, but you don't want to get run over by the sheep trying to get to the edge of the cliff either. You know what I mean? That's I guess that's my point, and that's one of the founding bases for our network here, is we want people to think. Don't take what I'm saying as the truth. Don't take what anybody says as the truth. Do your own research, draw your own conclusions.
Absolutely.
But people don't want to do that work. They want to say, oh my goodness, I saw it on TV or I read it on the internet, so it's got to be real. Because that's just easy. But
the net of a million lies.
The internet did nothing but exacerbate the greasy underbelly of humanity.
Yeah.
And I couldn't spell half of those words I just said, but I'm just telling you that's what it did. It has the ability. It's like anything else. It has the ability to do great good. Has the ability to do great evil.
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's all what people do with it.
Yeah, it's like that's why I was so excited when Dr. Jen was actually able to set this up, because this is stuff that people just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get little bits and pieces of it here, and they're going to get bits and pieces of it there. But for you to be able to bring all this together for people, I can guarantee you, there's a whole lot of people out there that are going, aha.
I get this vision years ago, and they used to refer to people as tree-hugging hippies. And I'm from the hippie generation, and I used to have long hair many decades ago. But
I was a product of the hippie generation, so I'll just leave it at that.
I missed Woodstock by 1 year. Son of a gunner, I would have been there. Any rate, how do I put this? My opinion, we need to reconnect into this planet. I'll go up into another subject here. And again, I have to say, I do not have all of the answers. The only thing that I'm discussing here is what my equipment physically has seen, what it records, and my thoughts and ideas on it. There's a lot of thoughts on Sedona. There's a gentleman up there that talks about string theory. And he was a graduate of MIT and so on, and he has a lot of credentials. Now, that very well might be. I certainly don't have all the answers. I have one piece to the puzzle, the part that I can prove and show physically what is happening and why it's happening. Things like string theory, though, are following along those lines. In order for string theory to work, and again, all people need to do is go into Google and type in string theory, you have to accept four knowns as absolutes. You have to assign them, like quantum physics or quantum mechanics. You have to pick the knowns in order for string theory to work. So there are a lot of mainstream physicists now going, well, string theory isn't so good because you've got to take it at face value. That does not mean that's not true. It's a possibility. So the reason why I make that point just like you said, Eric, people do not have to take what I say as 100% gospel of anything. The only thing I hope to do for people is get them to think outside of the box.
Mm-hmm.
Too much of the world of academia, and there's a lot of wonderful, good scientists, and I'm not slighting or generalizing, are stuck in that box. I've taken a lot of heat and a lot of ridicule in my life because I've chosen to go outside of it. But that's where things are discovered. You have to go outside of the box. Some things you have to accept that on faith until you can prove that it exists. So hopefully this broadcast and any more that come will inspire people to get out there and do a little bit more homework, a little bit more research with it. Yeah, okay, where do we go now? Keep at it. We're doing good.
Well, hey, why don't we do this? Because we've been going at this for about 45 minutes, and I'm pretty sure we got another at least 45 minutes in us.
If not more.
If not more. I've got a little animated musical deal. Why don't we both go refill our coffee cups, and maybe hit a little potty break, and our viewers can go get something to drink and come back and join us, and we'll pick this up in about 3 minutes. How about that?
That'd be great, and I hope everybody's thinking about questions later on, because I'd sure like to answer.
Well, they actually just to give you something to think about. There's a person in the chat room named Gypsy Angel is her nickname in there, and she wants to know if you've seen any UFOs out there, and we can talk about that when we come back.
Yeah, okay, yes. The short answer is yes, but we'll talk about it when we come back.
Okay, guys, we'll be right back.
See you in a bit.
We have some graphics that I'd like to show everybody, and maybe have you walk them through.
Sure.
The first one I have is just. We have some graphics that I'd like to show everybody, and maybe have you walk them through.
Sure.
The first one I have is just. We have some graphics that I'd like to show everybody, and maybe have you walk them through.
Sure.
The first one I have is just. The first one is actually no vortex, and maybe you could just describe exactly what we're seeing here.
Sure. Do you have the graph I'm looking at here shows up on the top it has an arrow that shows raw brainwave activity,
yes.
And then there's another graph that says magnetometer, Earth-generated magnetic field.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What you are seeing and what the viewers are seeing, if you look at the bar graph, it's called the vertical bar graph in the upper right-hand corner that says raw brainwave activity. Okay, that is showing my brain waves at that given point in time. Also, if you look over to the left and you see that multi-lined or multi-layer, almost a sphere, that also shows it's designated high gamma, high beta, low beta, so on and so forth. Theta already all the way down into delta again. So as you can see, if you look at all of my brain waves, alpha, beta, theta, delta, and even I got a little bit of gamma firing in here. They're all pretty much equal. They're simultaneous. Now, if you look at that, they're all equal strength. That's normal functioning. I'm wide awake and I'm alert. If you look at that little speedometer chart, it shows that attention span, my attention's up there pretty good 3/4 of the way, and I'm not really meditating, I'm just relaxed. So, and then if you go down and you look at the magnetic Earth-generated field, you'll see it's pretty much just flat. There's no major activity going on. That's the normal state of being right there. And I am not in a vortex. There's no activity.
Okay.
Next chart, if you have it there, and I'm not sure
how
you labeled that.
He labeled it for me. It's called at the start. Actually, it has several.
Does it have the green lines between the bars?
And it has 1, 2, 3. It shows their various points on the graph, and your attention is way up. Your meditation is way up.
Yeah. Okay, there is one. Oh, let me back up. These vortexes are not continuous. On average, they'll last 90 seconds to 2, 3, 4 minutes, and then they subside again. So this is not something that's continuously there spinning and emitting or reconnecting back in with the planet. They're intermittent. That's why I think it has a lot to do with inside of the planet where the magnetic field is created. That varies, it fluctuates, it oscillates, it pulses. So when it's spiraling up and it's emitting out of the ground, it's not going to be there continuously. It's going to ebb and it's going to flow. So when I was in this particular area and they activated, or I'll call it activation, when an outflow started occurring, you can see, and why I drew the green lines in here, you can see the raw magnetic energy as it's occurring from the Earth. You'll see a little dip or a little valley, and then if you follow that green line up, you can see the corresponding blip in my raw brainwave activity. And I've charted that as you go on a little bit from there. You go over to the next one, and you'll see a little bit of a blip, and you look in my raw brainwave activity, you'll see a blip there too. So if you go to the upper left and you're looking at I don't want to call it a pie chart, but you're looking at that spherical, you'll see a lobe coming off from it where I'm peaking a little bit of delta, a little bit of theta. If you follow the lobes around that thing like a cam, if you're following me with it, you can see where my brain is starting to go dominant, a little bit of delta, a little bit of theta, and a little bit of low alpha. Okay, when we're in a state of theta to alpha, that's usually our meditative state. That's why you're seeing my attention span is going up, and yet more importantly, I'm going into a more pronounced state of meditation. Now, that is a direct result, looking at that graph, of being subjected to an outflow of energy emanating from the planet in Sedona. And I've replicated this. I've done this a bunch of times, so it happens for me every time. Now, as the weather changes, I'm going to be doing this with other people. I have a portable brainwave monitor headset, and I'm going to be running the same tests I've done on myself with other people, so then I can conclusively show this has this effect.
You'll have the validation and verification.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then we had the one more graphic that was a dominant low alpha, which I can only assume is when you're in a very, very strong, or is that the opposite when you're in
yeah, I see what you're looking at here. Okay. Dominant low alpha. Look at my meditation. It's up over 90%, and my attention span is dropping a little bit. Now, what that is happening within me psychologically, or emotionally, or whatever you want to call it, I have disconnected from what's going on around me at that moment because my attention span has become less. That's not a bad thing. And at the same time, I'm going more within because my meditative state is higher. Let me back up. Why does this happen? I had a very dear friend of mine, was one of the fathers of the GE MRI scan. He was one of the inventors of the magnetic resonance imaging machine for GE Medical Systems. And him and I used to do a lot of research back and forth. And he described it best. Our brains work like what's called a phase-locked loop, PLL circuit. What that means is any external electromagnetic force or energy that is existing around us or we are near, our brains have a tendency of locking into that. Whatever the external strong or dominant is, will lock into it. If you've ever heard of people talk about they can't live under power lines, or electricity in their home bothers them, or they have to turn their breaker panel off at night just so they can sleep.
EMF sensitivity.
That is why they're sensitive to it. It's not hogwash. It's very, very real.
Right.
Now, in this case, since I am away from the grid and I'm in the this is one of my favorite spots up in Sedona, and it's not on the usual tourist map for vortexes. This is another one that I've found, which is just awesome, and it's removed, so you don't get a lot of interference from the grid. You don't have a lot of people distracting you, and you're not on a tour sitting in a Jeep. You're actually there in a spot, and it's very, very quiet. So that energy took me to a state of very dominant low alpha, which is really healthy and really healing. And that is part of what I call the Earth speaking to us. It's literally a connection to the planet, just like an avatar when they plug their tail into the tree.
Right, and I want to put this graphic up and leave it up for just a minute while we continue talking, just so everybody can see all three together, and see how that things change now that you know what each one of them is. You know, they can see for themselves how things change, how this physically changes you. And I mean, I can't stress it enough, because we have done, me and Dr. Jim and Johnny and several other people that were involved with the network, we've done a lot of experiments with the Gonsfeld experiment. And one of the things that we use, in fact, the sound files that we use when we're attempting to instigate the effect, are actually laced with alpha, theta, delta. You know, it's a progression down to that meditative state, and then of course a reverse back up.
Have you ever heard Tibetan monks do their very, very low tone chants?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. It brings them into my opinion, it brings them into a center, a connectedness of deep within, and this can be compared to that, but it's the earth stimulating you to bring you into that place.
Well, no, and that's another thing too. Going back to, we were talking about the Sophageal frequencies. Something that a lot of people don't know about them. They were based from Gregorian chants.
Yep.
And they were used because over 1,000 years of the Gregorian monks doing these chants around people, they saw the various effects that individual frequencies had. Basis for all this. So once again, this just goes back to what we were talking about earlier. When you start talking about the Schumann resonance and its various forms, every kind of outlying thing that we've ever discussed here on PEN kind of goes and falls right back in together.
Absolutely. It's all connected. Like the Native Americans say, the interconnectedness to the planet, literally, it's true. Literally.
Yes. And once again, it's a crying shame that we've become so disconnected. And I think every viewer that we have can agree with this. There's times when, you've had a really bad, crappy day at work, and the cell phone won't shut off, and the car just got a flat, and yada yada yada, and you can walk outside, sit underneath your favorite tree, have a glass of iced tea. When you stand up, you feel better. Well, there's a physiological reason why that happened.
It's not just being in that area. There is a connectedness. Right. And this is really going to sound off the wall and far-fetched, but I'm just going to put it out there to you, and people can either accept it or relate to it or go, yeah, this guy's nuts. I was fortunate growing up. At the time, I didn't think so, but I grew up in the middle of several hundred acres and didn't have a lot of neighbors or a lot of people around me, so I have always been very, very connected to the planet because she was my playground. That's how I grew up. Mm-hmm. I had a problem with that when I was young, going, gee, I wish I had other kids to play with or whatever, but I look at it today at over half a century years old, and I go, my God, I got to live something that very few kids get to see today. What I can do at this point, and I cannot do it at will, but I have had times where I could go out and be near a tree or by a tree and touch it and actually feel the electromagnetic energy transfer between my hands, my fingers, and the tree itself. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, and a lot of people just poo-poo it. But again, and I have to stress this, everything on how we interact with the planet is subtle. It's subtle, soft, quiet energies. It's not the overbearing, like the power grid is very, very overbearing. In fact, they did a study on people that raise their children under the high tension wires, the big ones, some people call them the Iron Men. There is an increased rate of childhood leukemia when you live underneath the power lines. They're detrimental to you. They affect you on a cellular level. But again, interacting with the planet. The planet's energies are very subtle. You have to take yourself to that place where you can work with those energies. That's why, again, I stress our ancestors knew how to do this naturally, and a lot of people still do, but the bulk of humanity has kind of grown away from that.
And
If you want balance, you need to reconnect back into it, and that's exactly what you're describing when you go and sit underneath the tree.
right. And Ben, right now I'm showing a graphic. It's actually the one that has the Sedona Vortex, and there's another one that's labeled 60 hertz as seen in Italy. And the reason I wanted to display that, like you just said, in fact, I'm going to go full screen with the one that's 60 hertz as seen from Italy. And what I'd like for people to understand is this was recorded, I believe you told me, by a colleague that is retired in Italy.
Yeah, he's not retired. He's still working, but he does Schumann resonance research over in Italy, and he's got a bunch. He does the atmospheric VLF research, and if you look at that chart, you can see the line at 50 cycles because that's what they run over there, 50 hertz, and right up above it, you can see a weaker, fainter 60 hertz. That is, if you look at our power grid, it's like a big antenna, so that's radiating 60 cycle signal. My point. 2,000 miles, 3,000, whatever it is, over in Italy, they can see the 60 hertz being radiated and bouncing around in the atmosphere that we're producing over here.
And just so everybody will understand, the Schumann resonances are also labeled on the bottom too. And as you can see, the first one is the strongest, second's a little weaker, third. Just to reinforce that 3,000 miles away, the magnetic field changes, but it still has the same harmonics.
Yeah, now Schumann resonance, just briefly, and I'm going to try to keep this very uncomplicated, because you have lightning strikes going on at all different points on the planet. A normal signal, like if you create it yourself, is a sine wave, and it travels 360 degrees, half a cycle is 180 degrees. The Schumann resonance, I call it a static wave. It's more of a standing wave, is the scientific term for it. It's there and it exists because you have lightning, you have the clapper and the bell ringing at different points on the planet, so this thing is just sitting there occurring. It's not like a sine wave that would be created from one specific point because there's many points creating it.
Right. Okay, well, let me ask you a question. You know, I showed that animation earlier, and I'll flip it up there real quick, where it shows the actual, where it's got the, I guess what you would call the chimneys that where they're coming out and it's bouncing all over and it's showing the waves bouncing inside the D level, the D layer and all that inside the atmosphere. But would something very, very similar be what's actually happening inside the planet when there's a lightning strike?
Inside or outside the planet?
Well, no, actually physically inside magnetically. When that lightning hits, it's not only electricity, it's magnetic energy too. So when that clapper hits and boom, it hits the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when that energy hits there and starts that resonance and starts, it's the clapper hitting the bell like you've said. Yeah. Wouldn't something very similar to what that animation is doing with bouncing off the atmosphere be happening literally inside the planet?
Yeah. Okay. Let's put it to you this way. A lot of people refer to the Schumann resonance, primarily the first Schumann resonance at 7.83 cycles, as the heartbeat of the planet. Not quite true. The planet herself resonates and vibrates at a frequency closer to 10 cycles per second, 10 hertz, which is totally independent from Schumann resonance. I call that her heartbeat. I call Schumann resonance her voice, and her heart actually occurs at around 10 hertz, 10 cycles per second. Would that be stimulated by lightning? Possibly. Is it something I've recorded with it? No, but of course I haven't specifically designed my equipment to go and do that. I believe I have seen her heartbeat. I'm going to throw something else in here your viewers are going to love because we haven't figured it out yet. Also in Sedona, and only in Sedona and other key areas on the planet like Stonehenge, the Great Pyramids, and several other spiritual special places, we're seeing another signal, and I say we because I know of other people that have gone to different parts on the planet and recorded this. We're seeing a signal near 8 cycles, 8 hertz. It is not Schumann resonance. It's what's called a higher Q, meaning Schumann resonance being a lower Q or broad in frequency, occupying 1 hertz in width. This signal is narrower. It's not man-made. I don't feel it's man-made. And yet, is it a product of the planet or a product off planet? Both of those scenarios are possible. We don't know what it is, but it occurs only at very special places on the planet. What does it mean? I have absolutely no idea, other than at this point all I can say is it would have a very calming and soothing effect on you because it's occurring again down at alpha theta frequency range. It's such a bizarre thing, and I wish I'd won the lottery if I played it so I could go and research that at other places on the planet, because it does exist.
Well, and that's the thing too, though, Ben. You've done this long enough to know that you know what you're looking at. So when you see something like that, you may not know the exact significance, but there's some significance to it.
Absolutely.
It's
almost like I want to call it a homing beacon. My sixth sense or my gut is intuitively telling me it's like a homing beacon, but what is it homing for? I don't know. It's only existing and emanating from spiritual, sacred places, so there is a meaning to it. What is that meaning? I don't know yet. Well,
and we mentioned this. In fact, I forgot to show this a minute ago. The picture that I'm using as our background right now is also. All right, now everybody can hear us. I wanted to show some pictures of some juniper trees.
Oh yeah.
And we talk about the physiological effects on us. When you look at these trees, you can see that they're actually twisted. And you had mentioned to me earlier that they're twisted because these actually grew where there was a vortex coming out.
Yeah. In fact, if you're ever in Sedona, or for that matter, anywhere on the planet, and if you're in a high magnetic area or an outflow, and Sedona isn't unique with outflows of energy. They exist on other parts of the planet. It's just that Sedona has been the primary area of my research. Any tree that's growing in a corkscrew motion or action, like some of the junipers you see there, is because as they grew for hundreds of years, decades of years, whatever the length is, they grew in a spiral-like motion because their molecular structure and their atoms and whatnot have been subjected to the vortex energy itself, so they grew in a spiraling that you see. The wire is wound, there's 100,000 turns, 20.5 miles approximately, of number 28 magnet wire, real thin magnet wire, wound over what's called the core. Now the core, if you look at a transformer, anybody can visualize a transformer, you'll see that a transformer is laminated. It's not just one solid chunk of iron, it is layered like little wafers stacked together, and between each one is an insulating material. In my coil, this is made up of 1/8-inch thick flat iron stock, and they become progressively smaller, so I end up with almost like it's almost circular if you look at it as a cross section, but each layer being 1/8 of an inch thick, between each layer of that lamination, which is all total 1 inch wide and 6 feet long, there is what's also called a layer of met glass. Now, if anybody is listening that knows anything about electronics, and they know of the term called permeability, met glass is a permeability of 2 million. Most plain iron has a permeability of maximum 600, 500 permeability, so interpret that over to 2 million. So I have that layered in it. So the long and the short of it is that iron core, which if you're looking at the picture of it, you'll see the copper wound over it, but the black part, that is the iron part of it that has a very hard permeability. I'm going to get too technical. I got to regroup my thoughts here. If you look at a bar magnet, where you have a long bar magnet, you have the North Pole and you have the South Pole. In essence, this is the same thing, except it's an electrical version of it rather than a permanent regular magnet.
Correct.
Existing. This is the electrical equivalent of it. The same thing that happens in that huge 6-foot-long coil that I have also happens in a bar magnet. Better way to put it. Bar magnet always exhibits magnetism, has a North Pole, has a South Pole. my coil responds to magnetism. So in of by itself, it's not doing anything. It creates no magnetic field. But any external electromagnetic force creates a voltage that
That's
trying to keep this simple.
it's induced into the wire.
It's induced into the wire, right? It has to do with the magnetic flux that's created inside of the core, and as that flux is flowing, it puts voltage, in my case current, into the copper coil windings, and then there's two wires that come out of that coil that go to operational amplifiers that amplify that signal and break it up stronger, so I can feed it into all of my equipment for analyzing the data that I'm seeing.
And most magnetometers, like you'd mentioned, are only, at the most, the professional high-end ones are 3 foot long.
Most of them are 3 foot in length, yeah.
And yours is 6 foot.
6 foot, Frankencoil.
Yeah.
I affectionately call it Frankencoil because it's big. And I actually have 2 of them so far, and I want to build up a couple more.
Well, we actually have some questions in the chat room, and one of them is well, both of them are actually from Miss Barbara in New York, but they're very good. She's curious if you could expand on your thoughts on the types of communications he thinks may be contained in the vibrational frequencies. The reasons why she's asked is, here on our network we've talked a lot about EVPs. We've talked about the possibilities that the EVP is actually a time-space cross-communication from another dimension.
Mm-hmm.
She would just like for you to expand on what you think, what other information could be contained in that.
I'm going to be speculating, but it's okay to speculate because I just recently taught myself how to start taking this low-frequency stuff that I recorded and compressing it to bringing it into audio frequency. So I put some of them up there, and I know Jim has listened to them already, and some of the people on Facebook have listened to it. Interesting. If you go to my website and you look at the book 7 Subtle Vibrations, I bring apart a little biblical passage where Enoch, which never made it in as one of the books, but I love the book of Enoch because there's a lot of information in it. In it, he tells of God created 7 spheres or 7 pools of water. Again, there's that magical number 7. A sphere within a sphere, and when Enoch was 400 years old, whatever it was, God took him up into heaven for a while and then brought him back, so the story goes. And Enoch asked God, as he left his physical body and went through the atmosphere, he heard sounds, and he asked God, what was that sound? And God told him in essence, in a nutshell, that's the sound of the planet, the Schumann resonances. Now, again, it's no mistake that the primary resonances, there's 7 of them. Data, information in the sphere around the planet, why not? And I'm not a scholar on this, but isn't there, either in Buddhist thought or some other different ways that people think, they talk about the 7 heavens or the 7 layers, or
Sure.
7 different levels planes of existence that you can be in. Electromagnetically, it would not surprise me, and I cannot prove this, that when the physical body ceases and we become just pure electromagnetic energy, that who's to say that electromagnetic energy doesn't end up in one of the Schumann resonances or one of those layers, or the collective, what they call the collective consciousness itself, being part of in that spherical cavity. Is it limited to that? Does that mean that our essence stays locked into that? No. I am sure we can do all types of other things.
But it would make sense that if we're basically an energy being in a flesh existence, it would make total sense that the Earth's magnetic field would be able to keep you contained here within the planet, which i.e. would make you a ghost. To make it in the vernacular, yeah, if you wanted to be, you would have the ability to stay here as a ghost, a spirit, however you would like to look at that.
Yes. And it's sad to say, my research that I've done into the paranormal things, so many people are still locked close to the planet, and that's not what we're supposed to be doing. But I think it's happened with a lot, and you've probably seen that in your own encounters.
Oh, I have. Barbara's second question that I wanted to ask before we moved on to anything else was...
Also, let me back up. Where she's talking about, can there be data or information in there? Yes. Can I actually record it and show it and decipher it? No, I'm not at that point. That does not mean that it is not there.
Well, I think she was more curious about what you thought it might be. Even if it's pure speculation.
Oh, what that information might be, the basis for life.
Gotcha.
Everything we need to know on being alive and sustaining is contained in it. We just know how to tap into it.
Right. And her second...
It's there. It's there for us. We just need to know how to use it.
And her second question is, what was your thoughts on about Nikola Tesla's influence in the DC energy game?
Nikola Tesla, just like one of the books written on him, was a man out of his time. I don't have to use the word brilliant. He should have existed 500 to a couple thousand years ago with everything that he knew. We don't know 1/10 of what that man knew, and may never will know.
Yeah, I mean, I know he was one of the first people that ever documented the EVP phenomena. And a lot of people don't know that. And he just said that it was, how did he phrase it? It was ghosts in the recordings, and this was when he was doing his first work with radio.
Oh yeah, even Thomas Edison, like a lot of brilliant people in their later years before they were ready to make their crossing over, delved into things that you could call metaphysical. I watched a program many years ago where Edison, after he built his phonograph, later on in life started taking 2 probes out to cemeteries and putting them into the ground, and he was recording sounds and communication just like you do EVP, but he was recording it on one of his original phonographs or whatever he called them. So that information's there, if I'm making sense.
But wouldn't he have also, given the nature of that beast and how he would have recorded the sound, he would have been recording the Schumann resonance, wouldn't he?
Oh, you mean Tesla? Tesla did record it originally. He said that there was only 3 resonances, probably because his equipment at the time only allowed for that. But on paper, through physics and whatnot, before they had the actual apparatus to see it, they knew it existed mathematically. They just could never prove it before.
All right. Okay. No, like I said, I happen to see those questions pop up, and I want to make sure everybody kind of keeps up with us, because it doesn't take long to leapfrog ahead and leave people behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ben, what are your plans for the future of your research? What do you
retire before?
Well, let's just say big picture. What do you want people to eventually be able to say about Benjamin Lonetree and his work and his contribution?
The only thing I would like to see happen is, of course, to unequivocally show how connected we are to this planet, and to develop the equipment where anybody and everybody can connect into it and have that experience. As time passes, you know what a toroid is? This is a toroid core. This is very high permeability, 20 pounds worth of magnetic core. Now it's like a donut. They call it a toroid. What I will be doing is putting about 20 pounds of magnet wire on that, or roughly 50 to 60,000 turns of copper wire, where, and this is going out on a limb, I'm going to be able to use things like this to actually tie into and monitor and measure the magnetic field that it emits from the brain, communication. I'm going to get beaten to the punch, I think, because I read a blurb from IBM that they have developed the equipment now and taken it to the point they said within 5 years they will be able to have the apparatus to do complete thought transfer between people. So I think they'll beat me to the punch on all of it. As far as a legacy that I would like to leave, the only thing I would like to see people doing is reconnect to the planet be what I feel we have been from the beginning, being connected to her. We've become so disconnected. I call it going back to the roots, going back to the base, where we can become in balance again. As far as leaving any big legacy, there's none that I would want to leave other than inspiring people to pick up where I leave off.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, and we talk about this, ad nauseum on our network.
South and south-north. But what the latest thing they're seeing now is the possibility exists we're going to have multiple poles, possibly 5 of them. And again, I'm not saying this is written in stone. This is just some of the stuff, the data that I'm picking up on from other areas and other people. So we may have multiple north and multiple south poles, or a main multiple north, multiple south, and then minor poles. That's probably a better good terminology to put in it. Now, the other things that I record, hang on just a second.
Okay.
This computer up here, I watched the Earth's magnetic field, and we just went through sunset transition, and everything's nice and quiet. So now as the night goes on, we look for abnormalities. Okay. If you take 2 pieces of quartz, white quartz, go out in your driveway or go out somewhere and get 2 pieces of white quartz, go in a dark room and strike them together, you'll see it light up. It'll spark. And that's the same thing is in a little, they call it piezoelectric starter that you use to start your grill for grilling outside and whatnot. Now, you have faults on the planet. Before you actually have a physical manifestation of an earthquake, that fault will start slipping, and the rocks and the minerals and the material inside of that fault will start scraping together and give off a piezoelectric effect. In other words, they produce an electromagnetic signal when it does that. Now, the signals that are produced occur usually at a frequency 3 cycles per second and lower. The long and the short of it is they call it earthquake precursors. I have the ability with my equipment now and the larger coils to be able to see that energy happening before you have an actual fault. And anybody that's been on my Facebook page has seen that. I'll put some of the charts up. I also see it when it does happen. Now, what's the significance of that? If there was enough of my systems scattered around the planet, you could do what's called triangulation and maybe do earthquake prediction. In other words, you could give people anywhere from an hour to a 1-week warning that something's coming in that particular area. But there's not enough of these systems around the planet to do that. If you have 3 systems, they call it triangulation, just like navigation for aircraft and other things, although they use GPS today. You can do it mathematically. When you got a signal here, you're seeing one here and one over here. You can draw lines, connect the dots, and you know where the focus is going to be. What I've been seeing is, and again, I'll take it into planetary changes, there's a lot more activity going on. I'm seeing, and I've been at this, I've had this equipment running down here 24/7 for 10 years now. There's an increase in activity, a lot of tectonic plate movement. Again, I'm not going to say doom and gloom. We had terrible things, what happened over in Japan. I think we're probably going to see more. A very hot, active area right now that's had a few minor quakes is the New Madrid Fault. That's really a good one to watch. Inevitably, and science knows, California is going to get nailed. It's just a matter of when. Nobody knows when. I can't predict when on anything.
Well, Sedona. Will Sedona have become oceanfront property when that happens?
The southwestern part of Arizona, I think, is going to disappear. It'll be gone. Big chunk of Texas is going to be gone. Big chunk of Mexico is going to be gone. And, of course, a big chunk of California. The only thing we have to watch is Sedona, as the crow flies, is 30 miles or whatever from Flagstaff. Flagstaff has Mount Humphrey in the San Francisco Peaks. That is a huge old dormant volcano. Statistically, that volcano, the San Francisco Peaks in Mount Humphrey, has erupted it erupts every 642 years. We're overdue. We're overdue about 20 to 40 years. If you go about 18 miles away from the San Francisco Peaks in Flagstaff to a place called Miriam Crater, there are at least 3 huge cinder cones. They're domes. They look like mini volcanoes. They're about 600 feet high. And I've spent a lot of time out there. You can be gone for a day, come back for a day, or you can go to bed at night, get up in the morning, and the landscape has changed. That's because there is lava movement not too far below the surface where it makes things move. It's really bizarre because you get up and you go, okay, what happened here?
It's like your feet moving under a blanket to your dog.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
So I think with the Sedona area, Sedona is very geologically stable. It has had a few smaller quakes, but I think if Mount Humphrey ever lets loose again, the San Francisco Peaks, and again, it's just a matter of time, Sedona is not going to see any destruction, but depending where the wind is from, it might have a problem with ash. Our prevailing winds, a lot of them come out of the southwest, so I think if Mount Humphrey lets loose, it's all going to go up the other way rather than, unfortunately, it'll go up over the Navajo Nation. But I doubt it'll come down into the Sedona area. Sedona in this part of the country is geologically very stable. Nothing to worry about.
And just so everybody knows, the New Madrid Fault, that's in Missouri, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Missouri, and it runs all the way down in the part of Oklahoma and goes all the way up to Indiana, Illinois, St. Louis. It's a scary area. It has the potential, and I'm not saying it's going to. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom on it. It has the potential, if it wanted to let loose, to make the Mississippi 200 feet deep and 100 miles wide all the way up.
Yeah.
Is it going to happen? I have no idea.
But that's a heck of a ditch.
It'd be a hell of a ditch, yes.
And the only reason I mentioned that is I just recently, we live, obviously, we're located south of Nashville, and almost all of our viewers know that, and if they don't, they do now. But we just moved here from St. Louis. Well, I'm from Texas. You know, I'm Dallas, Fort Worth, native Texan. Okay, I've never been through an earthquake. You don't have earthquake. It's too dry in Texas to have an earthquake.
Yeah.
I happened to be working nights in one of the most recent quakes that they had there in St. Louis, and I thought a trash truck was driving by.
I have.
And I didn't.
I've been
know.
in them. They're different.
You know, and I didn't know, and I wake up the next morning, and it's all over the news, and I'm like, oh, my God, we had an earthquake. And she's like, yeah, at 4 o'clock this morning, I'm like, I was eating dinner.
Yeah.
You know, I just got home from work. I was eating dinner. That's what that was? I thought it was a trash truck. No, that was an earthquake. And I'm like, wow. You know,
the first one I was in was up in Wisconsin, not too far away from Milwaukee, maybe about a half hour north back in the 70s. And I was over at a friend's house, and their china cabinet, all of the crystal in it started vibrating, and you could physically just feel a real little tiny thing. And I'm going, what the hell was that, a semi driving by on the road? And they said the next day it was a minor earthquake. So it's a bizarre feeling, different.
You know, and I can see, and I think the one that they had up there was like wasn't even a 1.
Yeah.
You know, so I can't imagine what somebody is dealing with when it comes to, you know, a 7.0 or an 8.0. I don't even want to think about it.
Over in Japan and the Ring of Fire over there, I feel so sorry for them. What a nasty thing.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's no way for me to say this, so I'm just going to say it. It's not like that's not the first earthquake that's ever happened in Japan's history. It's not surprising.
Absolutely. It's over Japan. The island itself is one great big volcano, so it's no mystery, just like Hawaii. Someday Hawaii is either going to blow sky high or it's going to sink.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is there's people are always, and for the loss of humanity, I am very heartfelt, and my heart goes out to all the families that had lost and the sacrifice, some of the, because I did know that there were terminal cancer patients that actually went in and did the actual cleanup because they didn't have to be encumbered with all the protection. They already knew they weren't going to make it, so they sacrificed themselves in that way, and that's awesome. But my point being is if you know you live in an area called the Ring of Fire,
and
you know that every...
You know, it's inevitable, just like California. I grew up in Tornado Alley, and I've seen my share of tornadoes, and people tell me you were nuts, but I used to go outside and watch them. I think they're awesome.
Yeah, well, my point being, don't maybe not build 12 nuclear reactors. I'm in hindsight, I'm just saying, maybe you don't build that many because of the problems that you just had.
You don't build them out on the San Andreas where they got one or two of them already.
Exactly. You know, there's. I'm just saying. Like I said, I feel for the humanity. I truly do, because some of us are even a little bit connected. Yeah. So I do feel for the humanity, but like I said, I can't be surprised.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
no, neither am I.
You know, so like I said, I hope they learn from this. You know, and maybe that's the whole big thing that we're shooting for, Ben, with tonight and everything. Is just that maybe people will learn that just because man built it doesn't make it right, doesn't make it perfect, doesn't make it untouchable.
No, God, no. In fact, years ago I belonged to the Amateur Archaeological Society back east, and I got very big for a while in a layman's sense of okay, did we come from cavemen and so on and so forth. A lot of the evidence that I've seen throughout my almost 60 years now, we've had a civilization on this planet more as advanced as we are today, if not more, and through natural cataclysm or self-induced due to man's arrogance, it all got wiped out through our own doing. There's too much evidence that shows we have achieved this technological level at one point before, but the Earth and the universe, if it wants to tear it down and start all over again, it can tear it down. So we need to be cognizant of and not be arrogant. That's a good point, good way to put it.
Yeah, and as much as a lot of people don't want to hear this, they need to. We very much, our existence is an Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah.
And the Earth wants to restart the drawing. It takes it and it shakes it a little bit, and guess what? It's all blanked out, and we start all over.
And she does that periodically,
yes,
too.
She
I'm
does.
not going to say it's necessarily a direct result of our actions.
Right.
She's going to go through cycles, and some of those cycles means whatever we've created isn't going to be here anymore, and we have to start again. It's the natural order of things.
Yeah. And it's not good, it's not evil, it's just, it is.
It just is, yes.
Yeah.
Wouldn't life be dull if it wasn't full of change? If we had Groundhog Day every day, including the bad stuff and the good stuff, what's the purpose of even being in physical existence if you didn't have this variety of good and bad?
That is true, and that is a lot of people's disconnection from the Earth, is the fact they are in a Groundhog Day every day.
Yeah.
Because
and
of
the feeling too. The job that pays the bills drives me literally nuts, and I lose my center, I lose my balance after about a month or two of doing it day in and day out. I've just got to get... People used to ask me when I used to lecture, they go, you really sound very spiritual, where do you go to church? And I tell them Church of the Desert, and when they ask me where it is, I say as far away from humanity as I can get out in the desert.
Amen, brother.
And so I can reconnect with this planet and find center and balance again. And people can do that. They just need to start doing it and learn how to do it.
Well, you know, and there's people in almost every, I don't want to say every ethnic group, but let's say, you know, we know that the Aboriginal, the Native Americans, South Americans, I'm sure in some of the African nations and tribes from back in the beginning dawn of humanity, the Fertile Crescent, all of that, knew how to do these things.
Oh yeah, naturally.
But
nature.
But if you think about it, almost every culture, and within America, there's so many cultures that, like, you could go down to the Cajuns. Some of the most intelligent, calmest, longest living people that we have are the people that live near the swamps. Why? Not because that they live near the swamp, but because they spend so much time in nature. They spend so much time with the planet. They become connected in that way. And when people start to realize that it's a matter of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's when people can open their mind to understand that there's that perspective, and that maybe that crazy old three-toothed guy down there that was catching alligators, some of the stuff he says you might want to listen to, because guess what? He's had a lot more experience of being around Mother Nature than you have.
Everybody has something to contribute.
Yes.
One of the biggest things I've learned in life, some of the most creative, most brilliant, sensical, logical people I've ever known in my life couldn't even write their name, let alone pass a test to get a college degree of any sort, and yet they're brilliant.
Yeah.
So life has taught me everybody has something to contribute, and no idea is necessarily wrong. Again, that goes back to thinking outside of the box. Just because you're not sitting there monitoring Schumann resonance or listening to electromagnetic energy emanating from the planet does not mean you don't know something.
Or that what you're feeling is not your imagination.
Back along those lines, too, that friend of mine who's passed on now from GE Medical, he had built a sleep lab on his property when he retired because his wife suffered from fibromyalgia and he was trying to find a cause and a cure for it. And one thing he found, he built an 80-bed sleep lab in his backyard so he could monitor people and their brainwave patterns and magnetic energy emissions while they slept. And one thing he found that science has validates now, women have a higher concentration of magnetite, the mineral magnetite, in their inner ear fluid than what men do. And the reason why I bring this up, if you look back through history and the bad rap that was given to a lot of women, women are more sensitive biologically because he had found the higher concentrations of magnetite. My point, they're more in tune with natural things that go on with the planet and with the universe because biologically they're built that way. Yep. That's one part of it. So I always tell people when I bring them up into Sedona, especially guys in particular, because we have a tendency of being wired one way and stuck with it. It doesn't mean you can't experience a vortex.
That's right.
You have to learn to quiet yourself and hopefully that's another thing a vortex can help you do is synchronize left hemisphere to right hemisphere where you can balance. Most guys can't do that. Some can. It takes practice, whereas it's more natural for women to do that. So that's another thing I say to the guys when women in your lives are feeling things or they go, I just felt like a tremor in the force and I think we're going to have an earthquake. Don't laugh at it because they're designed that way.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yep.
You know, and when we've had this discussion on our network too before, Ben, that when it comes to psi abilities, you know, whether you're talking PK or telepathy or, you know, whatever your flavor of the month is when it comes to psi ability, okay?
Yep.
We're all wired the same.
Mm-hmm.
We all have the possibility.
Absolutely, we just need to learn how to develop it.
Exactly. So, and much to what you just mentioned earlier, because it was a reference to Atlantis, so let's just throw that out there. Yeah. When it comes to the Atlantean society, that was one of the supposed legends and claims that they have, is the fact that they did have telepathy and they had a whole lot of other mentally geared technology. It wasn't a silicone-based technology like we have today.
Yes, they were big into silicone in my opinion, whereas we're more carbon-based and things. Yeah. And of course now with our computers and whatnot, everything has a quartz crystal clock in it to make all the electronics work. We're evolving in that direction. Funny you should bring that up. If you look at the counterpart to Atlantis, Lemuria, there's a lot of people that feel Sedona is part of the leftover island continent of Lemuria. You can't prove it by me. Anything's possible. Geologically, again, that geologist friend of mine that I met up in Oak Creek claims that all of the iron oxide in the red area in Sedona originated from northern New York State. And as the land masses grew apart, part of that migrated and made its way tectonically down into Sedona. Again, you can't prove that by me, but that's what he claimed. And again, other people are saying it's part of Lemuria. Any scenario is possible. If anything in life has taught me now too, growing up, and all of the books saying, okay, we're 10,000 years old, or the Bible, and I'm not putting down the Bible or any religious writings.
Understood.
Go ahead.
No. I agree with you, and I kind of think I know where you're going, but yeah.
Mankind has been around on this planet a heck of a lot longer than what they think. We've been here a long time.
Yeah. And
we've been advanced, and we've got knocked down, and then we've advanced again.
Well, and perfect example is the pyramids in Egypt. There is absolutely no way that those alignments could have happened, that those size of stones could have been moved by hands with logs and ropes. There's absolutely no way that kind of construction could have happened. There's just no way.
Levitation via ley lines or ET intervention, anything's possible. I rule nothing out. Of course, I can't definitively prove any of it, so I don't go in depth on it, but my gut tells me there's a lot more at work here. Another interesting thing, compared to, let's say, 10,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, or even farther back, the Earth's magnetic field and the energies within the planet were a lot stronger than what they are today. The magnetism and the energy is becoming weaker. My friends that are up in the high world of academia feel that our magnetic field is going to decrease in strength for about another 1,200 years before it reaches a zero point. And when it reaches a zero point, it's either going to fluctuate and wobble and then start building up in strength again, or that's when a reversal will happen. But everything that I'm seeing and everything that I'm recording is showing, how do I say this, that shift is accelerating. It's faster. Personally, I think throughout 2012 and into 2013, we're going to see the bulk of the major stuff, and then after that, things will start quieting down. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to have to wait 1,200 years to see a lot of changes. That's my point.
Yeah. Well, Ben...
But is it all bad? No. It depends how you look at it. It's like I tell people, grab a hold of the planet, learn how to connect to her, and ride out the storm. She will take care of you. You just know how to become part of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, Ben, we've been at this for 2 hours, and I want people to come back and listen to us again, maybe in a month or so. Sound okay?
Sure.
But once again, hey, thank you so much for coming on. I know people are going to take away from this. Like I said earlier, I'll be able to get you the file. You can put this wherever you'd like to.
If anybody, excuse me for interrupting again,
go ahead.
If anybody has any questions or wants to look at this, just go to google.com and type in Benjamin Lonetree. Type my full name in and do a search, and you'll get 4 or 5 pages of a couple of videos I have up there, and then my website and a bunch of other stuff. So, and at the bottom of the start page of my website, SedonaAnomalies.com, I have my email. You have any questions, shoot me a line. And if you want to look me up on Facebook, that's open too, and I accept anybody and everybody.
And you know, it's funny that you say that, Ben, because so do we.
We're here on my website. I have a real good saying, and I can't remember the person from a long time ago that said it. It says, half the cure for ignorance is to learn something new each day. The other half of the cure is to teach something new to another. I do not have all of the answers, but if I can get people's minds opened up to do their own research and look, there's so much to what we call life, and there's so much beauty. There's more beauty than there is negativity. You just need to learn how to look for it and become part of it.
And set your cell phone down at home before you go.
That too. I carry 2 cell phones during the workday, so during the weekend mine are usually turned off. That's why people go, well, how come I can't get a hold of you?
No, well, there you go.
Yeah. Get out in nature and learn to connect a little bit more. It's all there waiting for you, and she will take care of you. You just need to learn how to connect.
Yeah. Well, Ben, if you would, sir, stick around for just a minute. Let me kind of talk about our shows coming up next week, and I got a question for you.
I'll be here, and all of the viewers, well, there used to be an astronomy program that said, keep looking up. Well, I'm going to phrase it as, keep looking within and into the planet.
Yeah. Well, because when you look within, you can do the most change.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, everybody. Be sure and tune in tomorrow night. We will have Sunday Night Enlightenment. I haven't quite decided what we're going to show yet, but we will have a show on tomorrow night.